My name is Madison Clark. I am 31 years old and I'm from Seattle, Washington. For years, I believed family meant unconditional love. I believed sacrifices were mutual. I believed that when my mom called, it was because she missed me, not because she needed something. But last Christmas, that flight she paid for wasn't a gift. It was an invitation to settle accounts. And this time, I brought receipts. Have you ever been invited home only to realize you were actually summoned? What would you do if your mom suddenly offered to fly you home for the holidays after years of emotional distance? Would you think it was love, guilt, a fresh start? And what if, sitting at that dinner table, surrounded by fake smiles and overcooked turkey, you realized something hit you like ice water? They didn't fly you in to celebrate you, they flew you in because they thought you owed them. But what happens when the child they underestimated shows up with every receipt? Stay with me. It started with a text. Not a "how are you," not a "I miss you," just "I'm booking your flight home for Christmas, don't argue." Now here's the thing about my mom, she doesn't spend money unless it benefits her somehow. Growing up, everything was too expensive. Field trips? Too expensive. Prom dress? Too expensive. Therapy when I was struggling? Definitely too expensive. So when she suddenly insisted on flying me home from Seattle during peak holiday season, my stomach tightened. I called her. "Mom, flights are crazy right now. I can just stay here." Her tone changed instantly. Sweet, almost rehearsed. "No, sweetheart, family belongs together for the holidays. I already picked your seat. Already picked my seat." No discussion, no hesitation, just control. And that's when the little voice in my head whispered, "Nothing in this family is ever free." I checked the ticket confirmation she forwarded me. First class. First class. The same woman who once made me Venmo her for groceries when I visited, suddenly upgraded me. It didn't feel generous. It felt strategic. For the next few days, she kept texting little reminders. "Make sure you bring something nice to wear. We're going to have important conversations. Your uncle will be there too. Important conversations." That phrase echoed in my mind like a warning siren. See, in my family, important conversations usually meant one thing: someone needed something. And historically, that someone was always me. Money for repairs, help with legal paperwork, covering a credit card bill, costing something temporary. And every time it came wrapped in guilt. "You're the successful one now. We sacrificed so much for you. You wouldn't even have that job without us." The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about Christmas cookies or nostalgia. This wasn't about healing old wounds. This was an investment, and I was the expected return. But here's what they didn't know. Over the past few years, every time I helped them financially, I kept proof. Not because I planned revenge, not because I was petty, but because something inside me always knew, one day they might try to rewrite history. And if that day came, I wasn't showing up empty-handed. So yes, I boarded that first-class flight, smiling. Calm, polite, but in my carry-on, I packed more than sweaters. I packed documentation. And if they thought I was flying home to be cornered, they were about to learn something new about me. Dinner looked perfect. Candles lit, turkey carved, soft Christmas music humming in the background like we were some kind of healthy, loving family. If you walked in at that moment, you'd think this was a Hallmark movie. But I've learned something about my family: the prettier the table looks, the uglier the conversation's about to be. At first, everything felt normal. "How's work? You look tired." Seattle treating you well, polite, controlled, measured. Then it started. My uncle leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. "You know," he said casually, "raising a child isn't cheap. Your mom really stretched herself thin making sure you had opportunities." There it was, not an accusation, not directly, just planted. My mom sighed softly, not denying it, not confirming it. Just letting it hang in the air like smoke. "I did the best I could," she said quietly. Translation, "You owe me." I kept chewing, calm, silent. Then my cousin chimed in. "A lot of kids don't appreciate what their parents sacrifice." The word appreciate hit differently. Because appreciation in my family always meant repayment, not emotionally, financially. My mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm just proud you turned out successful," she said sweetly. "It makes everything worth it." On the surface, compliment. Underneath, reminder. I noticed something else. Every compliment came attached to a cost. "You always were the smart one. You landed on your feet. You're doing so much better than we ever did." It wasn't admiration. It was positioning. They were building a narrative. Successful daughter, grateful daughter, responsible daughter, the kind of daughter who wouldn't say no. Then came the pivot. "So," my uncle cleared his throat, "family should always support each other, don't you think?" There it was. The trap disguised as a moral value, because if I said no, I'd be selfish, ungrateful. Cold, if I said yes, the door would open. I glanced around the table. Every face was watching me, but pretending not to, and suddenly I understood something chilling. This wasn't spontaneous conversation. This was coordinated. The flight, the seating arrangement, the important conversations. They weren't easing into something, they were softening me. Layer by layer, compliment by compliment, guilt by guilt, and here's the scariest part, they thought I didn't see it. They thought the little girl who used to apologize for existing was still sitting at that table. But I smiled, nodded, played along. Because sometimes the most powerful move is letting them think the pressure is working. While you quietly prepare to flip the script, it didn't happen dramatically. No shouting, no slammed fists. Just a pause, a slightly too long silence after dessert plates were cleared. That's when my mom stood up and said, almost casually, "Why don't we move into the living room? It'll be more comfortable." Comfortable, that word again. We all sat down. My uncle leaned forward. My cousin suddenly became very interested in her phone, and my mom. She clasped her hands like she was about to pray. That's when I knew, here it comes. She cleared her throat. "So, there's something we wanted to talk to you about." We, not I, we. Meaning this wasn't emotional, it was organized. My uncle jumped in. "You know how tough this year's been, the market's unpredictable, businesses struggling." I blinked slowly, interesting. Because last year they bragged about how well everything was going. My mom sighed. "The investment property didn't turn out the way we expected." There it was. The real reason for the first-class ticket. I didn't interrupt. I let them explain. Apparently, they had taken out a loan to renovate a small rental property. Costs went over budget. The tenant backed out. Interest rates climbed, and now they were temporarily underwater. Temporarily, I almost smiled. Because in my family, temporary usually meant you'll be paying for this for years. My uncle leaned forward again. "We just need a little breathing room, a short-term loan." Nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. Funny how that phrase always precedes a crazy number. My mom reached for my hand again. "You're doing so well, sweetheart." We'd never ask if we weren't desperate. And there it was, the emotional hook. Desperate. Suddenly I wasn't just being asked for money, I was being asked to save them. To prove I was a good daughter. To repay sacrifices they'd been subtly rehearsing all night. "How much?" I asked calmly. They hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Then my uncle said it. 50,000. The room felt still. They said it like it was a parking ticket. $50,000. Like I had it sitting in my checking account waiting for holiday miracles. My mom rushed to soften it. "It's not a gift. We'll pay you back. Of course we will. This is just family helping family." Family helping family. But when I needed help after moving to Seattle. When I worked 2 jobs to pay off student loans. When I called crying from my empty apartment because I couldn't afford furniture. Suddenly it had been, "You're an adult now. Figure it out." I felt something shift inside me, not anger, clarity. This whole evening wasn't about reconnecting. It wasn't about healing. It wasn't about Christmas. It was about leverage. They flew me home, sat me at a beautifully set table, wrapped their request in guilt and nostalgia. They assumed I'd fold, because I always had before. My mom looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes. "So, what do you think?" And in that moment, I realized something powerful. They thought they were putting me on the spot. But they had no idea I came prepared for this exact conversation. For a moment, I didn't answer. I let the silence breathe. They expected hesitation, maybe even tears. Maybe a reluctant, emotional, "Okay, I'll figure something out." Instead, I reached down calmly and picked up my handbag. My uncle straightened in his seat. My mom's eyes flickered, hopeful. They thought I was reaching for my phone, to transfer the money, to prove them right, but instead I pulled out a thick, sealed envelope and placed it gently on the coffee table, not aggressively. Not dramatically, just deliberately. "What's that?" my mom asked, her smile tightening. I slid it toward the center of the table. "Before we talk about what I owe you," I said evenly, "let's talk about what's already been paid." The air changed. My uncle frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" I opened the envelope. Inside were printed bank transfers, wire confirmations, screenshots, dates highlighted in yellow, neatly organized, chronological. I had spent hours preparing it before boarding that flight. Not out of revenge, out of protection. I started laying them out one by one. 3 years ago, $8,200 for the roof repair. 2 years ago, $5,400. Credit card consolidation. Last Christmas, $3,000. Emergency car replacement. 6 separate transfers labeled temporary help. My cousin stopped pretending to scroll. My uncle leaned back slowly. My mom's smile completely disappeared. I kept going. "Here's the total." I slid the final page forward. $41,650, and that didn't include small Venmos, groceries, utilities, random short-term help that was never repaid. I folded my hands calmly in my lap. "I never asked for it back," I continued. "Because I believed helping family wasn't transactional." Silence, thick, heavy, my mom swallowed. "That's different." I tilted my head slightly. "How?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. My uncle tried stepping in. "Well, those were situations where we truly needed you," I nodded. "And this is." He didn't answer. Because the truth was simple, they didn't expect accountability. They expected access. Access to my success. Access to my stability. Access to my savings, without memory, without record, without consequence. "I'm not refusing to help," I said carefully. "But if we're talking about family supporting family, we need to acknowledge the full balance sheet." My mom's voice sharpened slightly. "Are you seriously throwing this in our faces?" That word. Throwing, as if documentation was an attack, as if transparency was betrayal. "No," I said quietly, "I'm protecting myself." That hit, harder than yelling ever could. Because they weren't upset about the money. They were upset about the loss of control. For years, I had played the grateful daughter, the understanding one, the reliable one. I never kept score publicly, but I kept it privately, and now the numbers were speaking for me. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. "So what are you saying?" I met his eyes. "I'm saying if you need $50,000, and I've already given nearly $42,000 without repayment, then maybe the conversation shouldn't start with what I owe." The room felt smaller. The power dynamic had quietly flipped. They thought I walked in as the solution. They didn't realize I walked in as the auditor. My mom's eyes filled not with sadness, with frustration. "You've changed," she said softly, and for the first time all night I smiled. "You're right," I said. "I finally did." The room didn't explode. It didn't need to. The explosion had already happened, quietly, strategically, the moment the narrative flipped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending myself. They were. My uncle cleared his throat. "Nobody's attacking you. We're just saying family shouldn't keep score." I let that sit there. "Interesting," I replied calmly. "Because tonight started with a reminder of everything you've spent on me." Silence. Not awkward silence, revealing silence. My mom stood up, pacing slowly like she was trying to regain emotional ground. "This isn't about money," she insisted. But that wasn't true. It had always been about money, not just dollars, power. Control, leverage, who owed who felt guilty, who felt superior, and for years, that had been them, until tonight. I leaned forward slightly. "If this isn't about money," I said gently, "then we don't need to involve $50,000. My uncle shifted again. The confidence he had earlier gone. "Look," he said, voice lower now. "We just assumed, since you're doing well," assumed. There it was. They assumed I was stable enough to absorb their instability. They assumed I wouldn't push back. They assumed I still needed their approval more than they needed my help, and they were wrong. "I worked for everything I have," I said evenly. "No safety net, no bailouts, no emergency rescues." "I figured it out." My mom's voice softened again, switching tactics. "So you're just going to let us drown?" That question was designed to wound, but it didn't land the way it used to. "I'm not letting anyone drown," I replied. "I'm just refusing to be thrown overboard." That's when something shifted in their eyes, not anger, realization. They weren't negotiating with the old version of me anymore. They were facing someone who had boundaries, and boundaries are uncomfortable for people who benefited from your lack of them. I stood up slowly. "I'm willing to help in a way that protects me," I continued. "If you want advice, I'll help you restructure. If you want a repayment plan discussion about what's already outstanding, we can talk." I paused, "But I'm not writing a blank check." The word blank made my uncle flinch slightly. Because that's exactly what they expected. My mom looked smaller somehow, not physically, emotionally. "You don't trust us?" she asked. I met her gaze steadily. "I trust patterns." That one hit. Because patterns don't lie. Promises do. The air in the room felt different now. Heavier for them, lighter for me. For years, I had carried invisible weight, the pressure to prove I was grateful enough, generous enough, good enough. Tonight, I put that weight down, and they felt it, not because I yelled. Not because I stormed out, but because I stayed calm, controlled, unshaken. Power isn't loud, it's steady. My uncle finally sighed. "We'll figure something else out." And just like that, the expectation dissolved. No dramatic fight, no screaming match, just the quiet acceptance that I wasn't accessible the way I used to be. I picked up my coat. "Christmas breakfast is at 9, right?" I asked lightly. Normal tone, normal expression, but nothing was normal anymore. As I walked upstairs to the guest room, I realized something powerful. They didn't fly me home to corner me. They flew me home thinking I was still cornerable. And that illusion. It shattered tonight, not because I demanded respect, but because I demonstrated it. For the first time, I wasn't the family's emergency fund. I was the woman who kept receipts. And more importantly, I kept boundaries. Before you click away, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the responsible one in your family? The one who fixes everything? The one everyone depends on but nobody protects? If this story hit home, don't stay silent. Comment below. I keep receipts too. Eyes, because sometimes healing starts when we realize we're not the only ones who have been guilt-tripped into carrying everyone else's weight. And if you believe boundaries are not disrespect, they're self-respect, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because around here, we don't just tell stories. We expose patterns, we reclaim power, and we remind each other you're not selfish for protecting yourself, you're evolving. Fire.